I'm Mark. I'm a principal program manager at AppNexus. I've had the privilege of working on GDPR for the past year with Julia, our Chief Privacy Counsel, and a cross-functional team. Julia may appear to be American when she speaks, but in actual fact, she's an honorary European because she's been working on driving the IB transparency and consent framework forward. And maybe honorary is a bit of a disservice because you spent so much time here now, you're probably qualified for residency, so maybe we should go for that.
Joke about that.
Anyway, it's been an interesting journey for me being a non-lawyer, entering the murky world of policies and legalese and getting to the point where I'm probably know just about enough to be dangerous. But a year ago when we started together working on this project, well, one of the first things we did was an extensive platform audit. And one of the things that came out of that, it became abundantly clear that we had a huge challenge in front of us to try and be compliant, not only because of how complex our platform was, but the advertising ecosystem and how everything is so intertwined. So that was something that we had to address first and foremost. Julia had insisted that we needed to talk to our industry peers to come up with a framework or some kind of solution that is industry-wide that everyone could adopt. So here we are a year later talking about the framework and hopefully a solution that will continue to evolve and address everyone's needs in this room today. So what are we going to talk about? I'm not going to talk about what GDPR is because it's May the 9th. So if we're going to talk about that, it's going to be a bit too late. But what we are going to hopefully come up with is something more actionable, things that you can do or think about, and then just take it from there. So just a quick summary of where we're at, so contextually what we're talking about. So in terms of the different components from a sell-side perspective, one of the key things obviously is e-privacy that we've heard a little bit about today, just the access of the user device or the browser. There's a concept of a CMP, a consent management provider, a standardized way to store and read cookie consent information for a user. It doesn't have to be cookie, but the initial implementation will be. There's the idea of vendors in the ecosystem, a lot of them, and how they can declare their purposes and the legal basis on which they rely for those purposes, and to be able to centralize that in a global vendor list so that it's somewhere central, it can be easily accessed by all parties, and then it can be a source of truth for all parties involved. Very, very quick snapshot on the sell side. Buy side, not wildly different, slightly less to think about, but e-privacy is still obviously something to consider. And then in terms of the CMP, still something that they need to basically surface to the users, especially if you're using vendors, partner vendors where you're collecting data. How do you sort of make sure that users are aware of the vendors that are being involved, and then how does that also kind of factor in the overall ecosystem? And then again, tying back to the GVL, the global vendor list, it's able to then have the centralized area to keep all that information. So, Julia, I'm a publisher. I've got a ton of things to think about. I'm thinking about transparency. How do I talk to my users? What kind of CMP should I be using? What UI does the UI look like? Will my revenue fall through the floor on May 25th? And then all this interesting sort of drip feed of information that we get from Google, that obviously is a big effect on us. So with all these things in mind, what advice do you have for us?
Yeah, magic advice, right? We all have every single answer. I think the key thing just for all of us in the room to acknowledge, and I think we heard Carson say it and Ben, is things are changing daily. It's actually pretty hard to stay on top of these things. That's our job. That's our job as one of your big technology providers. There's different documentation dropping from our partners and friends at Google. We speak with them multiple times a week these days. It's our job to look at that documentation and actually translate it and help our clients understand what they really need to do, but also be flexible and pivot. I think I heard Carson say that too. This wasn't something that a year and a half ago when we started, if you go back to some of those older slides, when we looked at the ecosystem, and I talked to Brian and I talked to you, Mark, and Nigel, and everyone kept asking me, what's the answer? Like, how do we solve this? What's the magic bullet that we can give our clients? And how do we do this on our own? And I think we realized we couldn't do that on our own. And it wasn't actually beneficial to our clients because we wanted to give back control to our clients and to the industry and make sure that all of us are actually working together. So in terms of a checklist, and then we can get into the details. What should you be doing? So we are talking about implementing registered CMPs, and what does that mean? So we'll talk in our breakout session a little bit later about the framework. We've talked with almost all of our big partners about it today, but implement an officially registered CMP to manage transparency consent. That's a key, I think, in order for industry to really be able to take back control and dictate the partners that they want to work with and make sure that everyone's interoperable and not have the big platforms dictate their own policy on our clients, right? This is actually taking back that control. I currently steer the policy team over at IAB Europe, but we are really actively pulling in our publisher clients. We're pulling in agencies. I see some folks from Group Admins Access in the room. We're pulling in big marketers to come and work with us and make sure that you get to actually dictate the policy of the industry so that the platforms aren't dictating that for you. Declare your complete list of vendors in this pubvendor.json file. I didn't think I was going to be an engineer. Mark and I have become best friends. Our engineering team is really close with us now. So make sure that you're actually understanding who your vendors are and declaring those vendors, again, so that you can choose, you can dictate who you want to work with, and you don't have to rely on those big platforms to do that for you. Ensure your vendors are registered with the global vendor list. This is a real key, important piece. And ensure, this is actually a new one. So speaking of asking us to read documentation coming out from Google every day and those drips and feeds and actually deciphering it and telling you what it means. Ensure that your listed vendors match your chosen vendors in DFP and AppNexus. So this is just as of 2 days ago. This is actually what we were hoping was not going to happen. Again, we've created a framework so that we can pull that decision-making out of Google and allow all of you to take control of that. There is this industry framework that they could support. They are thinking about supporting it on different sides of the business, but on the sell side, they are having you declare your trusted vendors and your chosen vendors actually in DFP and in AppNexus, instead of allowing you to declare that on your own sites. So for now, make sure that those match up, and then make sure that you're talking to Google and talking to your partners and asking them and really telling them that they should be supporting this industry framework, because it will allow all of us to talk and interoperate together instead of forcing all of your different vendors to build to their specifications, their requirements, and ultimately drive policy throughout the industry instead of taking that out and dictating that as an industry through IAB Europe and through other industry organizations.
Great advice. So on the flip side, as an advertiser, I'm thinking about similar kind of things, right? I'm thinking about, I'm dropping pixels on my site. How do I make sure I'm compliant? I'm also thinking about, will my reach be affected? Will my spend fall through the floor May 25th? Lots of things to think about as well. So what do we have on the checklist of advertisers?
Yeah, I think it's actually not that different, and I think this is one of the challenges that we've seen is we've talked to all of our large publisher clients for over a year now and understood how they're all thinking about GDPR and how they're thinking about controlling their vendors. But on the marketing side, we've been talking to our agency clients, but we've been trying to drive marketers themselves to also really think about the supply chain in the other direction and think about who they want to make sure they can continue to reach. So I think on that checklist, also implement an official CMP and also ensure that your vendors and the vendors of your key supply partners are listed on this global vendor list to ensure that you can still maintain access to that supply.
Great. So back to the meat of the presentation, how to thrive post May 25th. So on the publisher side, what are the kind of key things that we should be thinking about there?
Yeah, I think one of them, and this is something that we're helping a lot of our big partners do, is think through that supply chain. Think through which vendors actually need to get access to your data. Who are the vendors of your demand partners? This is not just your direct partners. This is actually a really good opportunity to dig in and look at every single company that gets access to your user data and take back control. whole point of GDPR. And it's a great opportunity, and it's a really good opportunity to actually go out and talk to your demand partners and think about who they're using. So that's one thing, perform thorough analysis. Mark spends a lot of time on calls today with our biggest clients, actually looking at that analysis. We are one of the only other platforms out there that actually scans all creatives that get delivered to our client sites. And because we've been doing this for many years, we have a lot of data and can actually tell you exactly who touches your data through that analysis. So reach out to us. We're happy to help with that analysis. How do you actually develop these meaningful relationships with key vendors? Again, talk to your demand partners. We can also help with that. Choose your CMP wisely. This is an interesting
focus on
one.
that for a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is a key one. So again, interoperability. We need to make sure that you can continue to use the vendors that you want to use. And in order to do that, you need to be working with a CMP that actually interoperates between the rest of industry through the framework and through Google. And there are a number of them out there to make sure that, for example, we can continue to do header bidding. We know that we can do this, but I think one of the challenges is actually understanding who our publishers have decided are their trusted partners and who they're comfortable with accessing their data. Again, today, you are going to have to put this information in through DFP and AppNexus. And so for us, through the framework, we're asking you to declare that on each of your domains, and that will help the rest of industry actually understand who your partners are.
Just on that point, Julia, so we have obviously built a reference implementation of the CMP, but which we're not registering officially. But we do have CMP partners that we have spoken to. So for anyone who's still looking for a solution, is there anyone that you would suggest or bring up or have a conversation with?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we are working closely with OneTrust. If you have any other providers that you're working with and they are not supporting the framework or they don't understand the framework, reach out to us. We've gotten on various calls with different providers out there, and our engineering team will get on calls with them, and we'll do everything possible to make sure that they understand how to implement the framework, and they understand what it takes. I know Carson just left. I don't know if Timo is still here, but Springer, they've been working very closely with us on the framework, and they're actually creating an open source CMP on top of the framework, and our engineers are also working closely with them.
Cool. On the advertiser side then.
I think you missed that last bullet point that's actually pretty important. So interoperability, making sure that you can continue to work with the partners you want to work with. This is something that the ad tech industry can't control. Again, we've been talking to our friends over at Google, and we do work very closely with them to hopefully get them on board with the framework. We have a commitment from them today that they will be implementing and integrating on the buy side, but we don't yet have commitment from them on the sell side. We can push them, but the real push needs to come from their clients, and they need to hear that that you all want them to interoperate seamlessly with the rest of industry instead of dictating policy on industry and making all of us build to their specifications. So if you're not talking to them already, I think it would be really helpful for them to hear directly from their clients.
There you go. Advertiser side now.
Yeah, advertiser side, again, it's actually not that different. You just look at it from the other angle. So think about whether you need to go out to your supply sources and make sure that they are listing you as an approved vendor, and they also need to understand who your vendors are. So who are you using to measure? Who are you using as a viewability provider? Who's your buy-side ad server? Make sure that your supply partners actually understand this, because otherwise, and this is not just about the rest of the industry, this is also the same thing within DFP and AppNexus. If you have not told them which vendors you're working with, it's going to be very hard for your campaigns to actually continue to deliver after May 25th. So you really need to understand that. You need to develop trusted relationships with your key vendors and really understand and decide who you need to work with and who you don't need to work with. Most publishers do not want to have to list 500 vendors in their CMP and provide that in a UX to their users. It's just disheartening. There's been various user testing in terms of what they're comfortable with, and then they're not comfortable agreeing to 500 or 1,000 vendors. So there is some culling that needs to happen there.
And that's going to be an ongoing problem and from May 25th, and hopefully we get some clarity as things go along and how the UX works, because obviously that's a very key part of that.
Yeah. And then I think one of these other important ones is, are you going to be getting the same metrics and insights from your partners after May 25th? A lot of you still need access to your data in order to continue to run your businesses. And I think we're slowly seeing that shoe drop as well, where there are certain partners that even if you have the right to access your own data, even if a user has agreed to that, they're not going to give you access to it. We will. We are committed to doing that, and we want to make sure that our clients can continue to use our platform and have the data they need in order to continue to operate.
Perfect. So just to summarize, we do have office hours after lunch, 1:30, down in the screening room around the back. So Julia, myself, Tamar, some other colleagues will be there if you have any further questions. But just 3 takeaways. I mean, we've talked about these 3 concepts quite extensively today, but collaboration, obviously very key for us. Standardizing, creating a solution that works for everyone is also really important to us. And then implementing, just need to get going and make sure that we're ready for May 25th and beyond. So thank you very much. And